What's up, everybody? Loser Mets fan here, recording this video a mere few moments after the conclusion of the Mets 2025 campaign. I'm driving home in the car right now. Just had a nice day of fishing, and I figured there was no better time than now to begin recording some videos, making some content in regards to the Mets. I apologize for the glasses. The sun's setting right now, just as the sun has set on the 2025 New York Mets. Now, I don't have a script for this. I do have a lot that I want to get off my chest and a lot of things that I'd like to talk about. So I'm just going to start with the immediate. The immediate is, of course, the 2025 Mets. Really, one word: embarrassing. I'll be the first to admit that after the Mets dropped the first game of this final series against the Marlins, I was pretty beside myself. Really contemplating really not even watching baseball anymore, to be quite honest with you. And I'm sure a lot of longtime Mets fans can relate. Maybe some of you have had periods where you didn't watch baseball, or at the very least Mets baseball, for some period of time. I know I have. However, that has not been the case recently. Been watching religiously since back in the 2015 campaign. So it's about a decade now of watching, after a lifetime of soul-crushing defeats here. We're all in it together as far as that's concerned. So yeah, the 2025 New York Mets, for a lot of the young Mets fans, probably the worst, most embarrassing season you've ever seen. I would argue that it's right up there with any that I've ever seen, including all of the other infamous collapses, chokes, and lack of success that we've all grown accustomed to. So yeah, immediately, I'll be tagging this person in underneath this post. I had been predicting. My guess, naive me, was that actually the Mets were going to win today, and that the Reds were going to win as well, to dash our hopes. I was corrected by someone wiser than myself on Twitter, who, like I said, will be tagged underneath this, that in fact what was going to happen, which was what indeed did come to fruition, which was that the Reds would lose and the Mets would lose, which we all know by now is the case. Now, we all know, as longtime Mets fans, the Mets will break your heart in pretty much the worst way that they can. They're not even going to make it easy. They'll rope you back in, and then they'll kick you in the nuts. And excuse my language, but coming off the wake of a 2024 season that was a lot of fun. I think we all had a blast watching that season. It was very memorable, very fun, a lot of excitement. And unfortunately, this franchise is allergic to making the playoffs in consecutive years. And that's the case yet again here in 2025. We failed yet again to follow up with any kind of sustained success, any kind of sustained winning, any kind of sustained postseason run. And what I'd like to say now let me wrap up my thoughts on the 2025 campaign and the immediate aftermath of this just downright embarrassing loss today, and the nail in the coffin of this absolutely embarrassing season, to put it nicely. Can't put up a single run against the Marlins in the final day of the season, when the Brewers gave us a window, gave us a light to simply win a game against the Marlins to make it into the playoffs. Now, we don't need to go into every single loss, every pathetic performance, and every squandered opportunity from the 2025 Mets. I could name a bunch. I'm sure you could all name a lot more that I forgot as well, because the fact of the matter is that there was a lot of them. And this team was simply not clutch. This team was simply not a winning team. And that's what we've seen, and that's why this team is not going to make the postseason. And this season is over. And not a winning team. And absolutely, we're all well aware of the widely publicized stat that this team had absolutely no comebacks when trailing in the 8th or 9th, I believe. Over 65 games. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. But yeah, not a clutch team at all. Really just, again, diehard Mets fan. They're just a quintessential Mets team. Colossal letdown in every single capacity. Now, with that being said, I don't necessarily want to beat a dead horse. I'm trying to come here and actually look forward to the future, because, like many of you, my sobriety from Mets fandom lasted a whopping 15 minutes after the loss in the first game of the Marlins series here. And, I think it's basically was going to go one of two ways for me individually. And that was either stop watching this team, stop following this team for an indefinite period of time, or do what I'm doing now, which is speak on the team, continue with my fandom, grit my teeth, and continue to root for this team that continues to let us down year after year. So that's what's going on here now. That being said, the good, the bad, and what we can expect and what we need to do in the future. So in the future, immediate reactions, call it cliche, call it an overreaction. Well, I don't think many of you will say that. I think many will agree, but I think the immediate move here is that Carlos Mendoza needs to be relieved of his duties as the Mets manager. If anyone disagrees, feel free to let me know why in the comments here. In a response, I think that as far as I'm concerned, Mendoza had been managing this team extremely poorly during the second half of the year. I'll be the first to admit that when this team was rolling in the first few months of the year, I loved him. He was saying all the right things, seemed like an even-keeled guy, and, I liked him a lot, and I was really, really optimistic about him. But you know what? You find out about your leader, you find out about your manager when things are going tough. And we found out about Carlos Mendoza, and what we found out is that he was not deploying his troops. He was not utilizing the roster in an optimal or effective manner, and that's everything from the defensive alignments and configurations to the bullpen, as well as the lineup construction and utilizing players off the bench, in-game moves. I really think that he was managing extremely poorly and managing very scared for an extended period of time here. And I'm sure some will say that he was trying to do the best he could with a flawed roster. We can get into that later. And this is going to be a long video. I mean, look, this is a catastrophic season, and there's a lot to speak on. But yeah, I mean, a flawed roster to be sure, but I think with the pieces that were in place, he was pressing the wrong buttons and absolutely not managing well at all. So I believe that Mendoza needs to be let go. I think that his time as the Mets manager needs to come to an end here. So that would be the immediate that would be the immediate move to make as far as I'm concerned. Now, I guess it makes sense to transition from speaking on Mendoza to David Stearns and the roster that he put together for the 2025 Mets. This has been spoken on at length, but obviously the papier-mâché starting rotation that was pieced together here, that a lot of non-Mets fans, to give credit to them, saw the writing on the wall. Obviously you have injuries, but some of these players, like a Frankie Montas, these are injury-prone players. So that was a terrible signing. We all knew it at the time. That was not hindsight. Frankie Montas, terrible signing. Okay? Griffin Canning did well until he got injured. That's really here nor there. But David Stearns did not create a solid enough roster in order to fortify this team in the long term for a 162-game season. Excuse me, just going off the top of the head here. So, specifically, as we all well know at this point, David Stearns' primary failure with this team came at the trade deadline. So, signing Juan Soto, re-signing Sean Manaea, fine. All fine and dandy. Obviously, Sean Manaea had an atrocious season coming off of an oblique injury. But whatever. We were all fine with that move on paper. We really can't revise history here and say that we weren't. So, Juan Soto, great. Sean Manaea, fine move at the time, panned out horribly. Bunch of other moves, we can go through and dissect those player by player at another time. The trade deadline moves were abysmal at best. Rogers was okay as a Met. Not particularly clutch. We gave up a decent amount for him. We gave up Budo, a semi-decent pitcher who I believe was out of options but under team control, as well as a prospect with some upside. So not nothing. Rogers, and that's the best of the bunch. Then we had Helsley, who we all know in many ways is a main reason why the Mets are not in the playoffs right now. Blown games, absolute bullpen implosions. Ryan Helsley was leading the charge in the second half of the season for the Mets. Obviously, not putting the season squarely on him for not making the playoffs, but he was one of the main offenders. And then coming to the position player aspect of the trade deadline move, Cedric Mullins was a colossal failure. I personally, as a fan, had absolutely no interest in acquiring him. Obviously, with McNeil not really being a center fielder, although he played pretty decently for the most part there, and Tyrone Taylor dealing with some injuries, Jose Siri being injured for quite some time too, and also just being a really, really ineffective baseball player. I guess that was probably what prompted the move, as well as just a lack of other options to fill that center field hole there, but not a player that I was interested in going after at all, and proceeded to just absolutely fail in every capacity of baseball as a New York Met, from the baseball IQ side of things to the offensive production, even some defensive lapses as well, and really not contributing in any facet of the game. And I'm sorry to say that, because I'm not trying to denigrate these players, but the facts are what they are, and the numbers don't lie, and the product on the field is what it is. So David Stearns, absolutely horrible trade deadline moves. I think another understated failure by the front office for the 2025 Mets was only calling up our pitching prospects out of abject desperation. I think that if we had attempted to call up some of these guys, whether it had been a McLean, a Sproat, even a Tong. I know some of these guys struggled a little bit. Obviously, McLean was phenomenal for the most part. Tong and Sproat were a little bit hit or miss, but this is what happens when you are calling on inexperienced players out of absolute desperation, as opposed to trying to plug a hole, trying to fortify the team and give it a little spark, as opposed to we have no options. This is a desperation move out of sheer necessity. Now, I fully believe that if these pitchers had been called upon in a more diligent manner at a different time, some of them sooner, we would have seen more success from someone like a Sproat, for example, or even Jonah Tong. So I think that that's a little bit of an understated failure by the Mets front office, reluctant to call upon these pitchers until it was effectively too late. It actually really reeks of the 2022 season, I believe it was, when we called up Francisco Alvarez as a desperation move at the very end of the season because the team was spiraling out of control, and he was in over his head, just like Jonah Tong pretty much was this year for the most part. So yeah, those type of moves aren't good. You got to be more proactive. You can't be reactive. You need to be calling on these players to fortify your team, and not because there's nowhere else to turn. It's the way that this team was managed. It's the way that this team was deployed from a front office perspective as well. So that kind of summarizes that. Now, where do we go from here? We'll talk about the good and the bad going forward with the New York Mets. So I guess we'll go ahead and let's start with the bad so that we can finish with the good. I'm not here to just be Frank the Tank, pulling my hair out. This is the, end of the world. I mean, like I said, this sucks. This is an absolute embarrassment as a sports fan to be associated rooting for a team that is just going to embarrass the fan base and be just a laughingstock of the sport. And that's the case here. But we'll get that being said, let's get the bad out of the way, and then I'll finish off speaking on some things that I do think at least are positives for this team going forward that we can potentially look forward to in the future. Now, the bad, and when I say the good and the bad, I'm talking about going forward, 2026. This season is over. It's done, and there's nothing we can do as fans but move on and look ahead. And let's take a look now. So obviously we all know, I guess the elephant in the room is obviously Pete Alonso likely to opt out. Now, that's a very, very controversial situation, I think, in the minds of a lot of Mets fans. You have a lot of Mets fans who really want him to be re-signed. You have a lot of Mets fans that may be okay from moving on from Pete Alonso at this point in time. Now, I'll admit that I'm a little bit torn. So let's take a look at both sides here of the Pete Alonso conundrum. Now, Pete is likely to opt out, and after a pretty productive campaign here, I think it's safe to say he will command more on the free agent market this upcoming offseason than he did coming off the last season. So I think when you look at both sides of the coin with the Alonso situation, you have one side wanting to re-sign Pete. Now, let's look at that side. Steve Cohen's the richest owner in the sport. The amount of money that he spends and the team payroll is of no concern to us, really, as far as we're concerned as fans, other than if it would prevent the organization from making other moves and kind of hamstring them going forward. So if that's the case and the team is just going to have no limit on spending, then yeah, go ahead and sign Alonso, give him the best offer, and bring him back. This is a productive player. This is a fan favorite player with some really great signature moments as a Met. Now, that being said, even in this past offseason with the acquisition of Juan Soto in the biggest contract in MLB sports history, the team still expressed that they want to remain under the luxury tax threshold to some extent, which lets us know that this is a team that's not going to just burn money and sign every available player in an effort to desperately win championships and make the playoffs and all that. This is a team that's trying to build sustained success, which obviously didn't happen this year, and doing so through the farm system, through making intelligent moves, and not just simply throwing money at every player that we can. So with that being said, if I had to give my opinion on it, as much as I genuinely love him as a player, I would say that I do think that it's depending on the contract situation, probably going to be time for the Mets, unfortunately, to part ways with Pete Alonso. Now, that being said, if he doesn't opt out, fantastic. Would love to have him back for another season on the deal that he's currently on, or if they're able to negotiate a similar deal where he wants to come back for another year or two with another opt-out, I would be more than happy as a fan to be in support of that, and that would be absolutely fantastic. Now, if he's looking for a contract of 3 or more years and a lot of guaranteed money, I think that unfortunately the Mets are gonna have to walk away and pass on that. You know, this is a player that the Mets had a deep run last year. We all love the home run he hit in Milwaukee. It was incredible. One of the great Met moments in the past couple decades. But the reality is that, and it's not his fault, that this team has not been able to get over any kind of hump, let alone find sustained success with Pete Alonso on the roster. Again, not his fault, but it hasn't been the case. So I do think that it may be time to part ways with Big Pete. The other elephant in the room, as far as the bad when it comes to the free agency for next year, is of course our other player who can opt out, our elite closer Edwin Diaz, who had a fantastic season. Now, I would like to actually mention, because I forgot to mention this before, as far as Mendoza's poor management, the utilization of Edwin Diaz, I do believe, was a primary aspect of Carlos Mendoza's poor management in 2025. Edwin Diaz should have been used more aggressively for more 5-6 4-out saves, deployed in high leverage situations. These games were not treated like must-win games. These games were treated like low leverage games. And those all added up and resulted in a team that barely finished above 500 and missed out on a playoff spot. And the misuse of Edwin Diaz is a major factor why that was the case. Now, Edwin Diaz going forward has the ability to opt out, coming off a fantastic season, striking out tons of guys, phenomenal numbers across the board, just an absolutely elite closer that any team would love to have at this point, and absolutely a bright spot in the 2025 Mets. Edwin Diaz had probably his best season as a Met. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but just based on what I saw this year, I think it's safe to say that it very well may have been his best season as a Met, and quite frankly, probably one of the best seasons of his career as a whole. So I think that Edwin Diaz, I would put in the same category as Pete Alonso. Fantastic player, fan favorite, the trumpets, epic, iconic player, coming off a fantastic season. Overall, a great Met. Obviously, had some down seasons, had the injury problem, but overall, a fantastic relief pitcher. I would essentially look at Edwin Diaz the same way I'd look at Pete Alonso. If he does not opt out for whatever reason, incredible. Love to have him back. But if he opts out, I think that unfortunately the Mets are going to have to part ways with Edwin Diaz, because similarly to Alonso, and again, not his fault specifically, he was overall very good. He has been very good overall. This is a player that during his Mets tenure, they have been unable to find sustained success, consecutive postseason berths, and other things that we want to see out of this franchise and this organization. So Diaz, I would say the same thing. If push comes to shove, we're unfortunately going to have to move on from Diaz. Now, what does that mean? Because you'll have many Mets fans saying, well, where are we going to replace the production from Alonso? Where are we going to replace the production from an elite closer like Edwin Diaz? Well, I think that brings me to the sad state of affairs as far as the 2026 Mets are concerned. I would tend to think that the 2026 New York Mets are going to do what I've been referring to as a soft rebuild, or at the very least a recalibration and reset. Now, does that mean the 2026 Mets are going to punt on attempting to compete in any capacity and make no effort to even achieve a playoff spot in 2026? I would hope not, and I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. However, it's a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility, as unfortunate as that is, and as much as none of us want that to be the case as fans, that may be the position that this organization is in right now. And I'll continue to explain why I unfortunately believe that's the case. When we go through and take a look at this roster, we have Tyler McGill not going to be available all of next year, just had Tommy John. Sean Manaea was utterly ineffective in any capacity in 2025. This is not somebody that unfortunately we can rely upon going forward. This isn't somebody that we can pencil in as somebody that's going to be able to contribute for the Mets going forward, unfortunately. You look at, obviously we all know what's happened with Senga. You know, is Senga somebody that could be your fourth or fifth starter in 2026 and maybe you'd feel okay with that? Yeah, I could buy into that, but that's not anything exciting. That's not what we thought we had with Senga even as recently as the first half of 2025. This guy was pitching like an ace. And there's been a lot of problems. Then you get to David Peterson, similar situation. Fantastic first half, exceeded his career innings limit, pitched for a season, and ultimately was rendered completely ineffective down the stretch. And you know, when the smoke settled here and the dust has cleared, the Mets' most effective and consistent starting pitcher for 2025 is probably Clay Holmes. Again, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it was Clay Holmes. And that's a guy that you're looking at, again, I mean, talking about going past your previous career high in innings pitched. I mean, he did that and then some. So how much is Clay Holmes somebody that you can rely on going forward to give you innings to pencil into the rotation? Now, that is the glaring issue, excuse me, with the 2025 Mets that we may see bleeding into the 2026 Mets, which is we have these players like Minaya, like Clay Holmes, who I think Clay Holmes will be okay. I'm all right with Clay Holmes going into 2026. But you look at someone like Minaya, if this continues, what do we do? This is a player getting paid a substantial amount of money, signed for multiple years, that may be completely unpitchable for any team trying to compete for any sort of a playoff spot. So that's one of the things that really hurt the Mets in 2025 is we have these players that are not controllable. They do not have options. And we're forced to throw them out there because they're signed long-term. They're getting paid a lot of money. And they have to be on the roster. There's no way that they can be shuffled around. They're locked in. And that proved to be incredibly detrimental this past season. So the rotation is in absolute shambles. It really shows no stability whatsoever. There's no core. There's no core whatsoever to the starting pitching, and it's arguably in a substantially worse spot than it was going into 2025 when there's already many question marks regarding the starting pitching. Going on from the starting pitching, you have the relief corps. Now, if Diaz opts out and we don't re-sign him, we have no closer. I don't believe really any of these guys are under contract. So Rogers, I believe, is a free agent. Helsley, do we have him under contract? I don't know. Don't care. I don't think any Mets fans care. So Rogers is gone. Helsley's whatever. You got Stanek. You got Brazoban. Okay, Brazoban's fine. I have no really major issue with Brazoban. Reed Garrett likely heading for Tommy John. Correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, on this again. I don't have any information in front of me. I'm just going off my gut and my memory off the top of the head on the way home here after this just pathetic season. Brooks Raley, I believe, was on a 1-year contract. This was one of our most effective pitchers out of the bullpen. You're basically looking at completely reconstructing an entire bullpen from scratch here. So the bullpen's in shambles. The bullpen's non-existent. The starting pitching's in shambles. The starting pitching's non-existent. Then you go to your position players, and let's look around. Let's look around the field here. You got Nimmo in left. We know what Nimmo is at this point. We know what Nimmo is here. You love him, you hate him. He's Brandon Nimmo. He had a decent season, mid-700s OPS, hit some homers here and there. He's kind of morphed into a different player, as we all know. He's kind of morphed in. He's really completely changed from a top of the order leadoff table setter, walks a lot, gets on base a lot, sort of a more prototypical modern baseball player, outfielder, where he's going to pop a decent amount of home runs, not really particularly hit for average, and all of that. So you got Nimmo in left, fair enough. I know a lot of people want to move on from Brandon Nimmo. I believe he has a no-trade clause, and he's getting paid a pretty good amount of money. I don't really think any team is going to be interested in taking on that contract unless the Mets are willing to eat a lot of that salary. Quite frankly, I'm not really too worried about that. If you're telling me that Brandon Nimmo's our starting left fielder in 2026, fair enough. I mean, if you want to tear the whole thing down and do more of a complete rebuild, then yeah, absolutely shop him around and see if you can get a team that's interested in taking on that contract. Center field is vacant. Mullins, obviously no interest. I know that Tyrone Taylor has, kind of found a place in our hearts, but this is not a player that I'm concerned with bringing back, or anybody that I believe is going to be a factor moving forward, nor should he be. So center field is vacant. Obviously, we got Juan Soto in right. We have we're looking at Beatty at third base, of course. Played well. of course, Lindor at short. And then, second base, you're looking at Beatty can play there as well if need be. You got McNeil. On the McNeil topic, again, I know a lot of people are ready to launch McNeil into the sun, and they've been done with him for a long time. As far as all the players to keep around, I arguably have the least problem keeping Jeff McNeil around. I mean, this is a guy that is extremely versatile and has been a solid above average hitter and can play any position. I think he played almost every position this season. Even you saw an inning or two in right field. I mean, played second base, center field, right field. He can play anywhere. He's useful to have, even if you're doing a little bit of a rebuild. I mean, this is a player that you can plug in on a day-to-day basis, on a game-to-game basis, and it just makes managing a team. It makes things easier when you have a player with that kind of versatility. So even if you're doing a rebuild, he's not necessarily a player that's problematic to have around. He doesn't have to be taking the place of a prospect that we're interested in seeing what they can do on the big league level. Once again, that being said, if at all possible, if the deal is right, completely fine with moving on from Jeff McNeil as well. But I don't think he really creates any sort of a log jam. You can just plug him wherever you want, and let your young guys play wherever you want them to be. So second base there, I mean, you got Luis Angel Acuna. I mean, again, this is a player that so far he's been a flash in the pan. 2024 came up when Lindor was injured, set the league on fire. A lot of people were really high on this guy. I wasn't necessarily somebody that bought into the Linsanity run that he had. Again, we're looking at a player that hit 0 home runs the entire 2025 campaign. If you want to keep him on the roster as a defensive player and as a pinch runner and stuff like that, maybe he can provide some value. I guess essentially what I'm saying is that he's relatively just a non-factor here. I don't really view Acuna Jr. Not Acuna Jr. Luis Angel Acuna as really much of a factor at all going forward. First base, there's going to be a vacancy there if Pete opts out and they aren't able to figure out contract agreement between the Mets and Pete Alonso. So first base, obviously kind of reverting to the contingency plan, that we would have been looking at had Pete Alonso not re-signed going into the 2025 season. You're looking at potentially getting Mark Vientos some reps over there and having him be your everyday first baseman. That's not something that I necessarily have a problem with. I believe we have an interesting prospect as well in the system. Excuse me if I'm wrong. Is it Clifford? So maybe it's time to give Clifford a chance, and then you would pencil in Vientos as your primary DH. And excuse me, I'm gonna just kind of jump back. Actually, Starling Marte, I believe, is completed his contract with the New York Mets, so he will be done now. So he's no longer going to be a New York Met. I don't think this is going to come as a shock to anybody, but I think obviously the Mets move on from Starling Marte. I don't really necessarily know what he's going to look to do here or where he fits in as a player in MLB going forward. Again, did fine. Honestly, acquitted himself well, did a nice job in his role in 2025. No disrespect to Starling Marte, but he has completed his contract and is no longer a part of the New York Mets' future. So Starling Marte is not around. He is going to be no longer with the Mets, and that leaves a spot for Mark Vientos either as the DH or first baseman, a mix of both. And I think that's probably what we're looking at realistically for 2026. Then we come around to the catcher, and I'll get into that in just a moment. When we talk about the good, we got Francisco Alvarez. I'm not sure about Torrens's contract status. I would assume that he's still under control. So I'm perfectly comfortable with proceeding forward with Francisco Alvarez as your primary catcher and Luis Torrens as the backup catcher. Torrens was fantastic at throwing out runners, just absolutely elite. And well, let me stop myself, because we're not talking about the good, we're talking about the bad. So to bookend the bad for the 2025 Mets, Mendoza also, as far as I'm concerned, mismanaged the lineup construction and the way that he platooned his players, whether that's Vientos and Marte or Beatty and Acuna and Alvarez at times. To me, there seemed to be very little rhyme or reason to the way that he was doing this. You know, Vientos would be starting at third one day, DHing one day, not in the game one day, and then you'd throw Marte in there. It really, to me, and maybe there was something going on under the hood that I'm sure there was some analytics of some sort, but there was very little rhyme or reason. There was indisputably very little consistency when it came to why is Vientos playing third this day? Why is this player DHing this day? Why is Marte doing this? Why, whatever, you know? Which brings me back to the desperation style of managing that we saw from Carlos Mendoza. Brandon Nimmo, who was clearly not particularly moving well pretty much the entire season, was deployed in center field as a desperation move in one game down the stretch. You had Marte being sprinkled around the outfield here and there, not seemingly out of a proactive effort to aggressively manage. More so, it appeared to be, let's throw anything at the wall and hope something sticks, because nothing is working right now. And that is not good management. Beatty being played at third, second, not being in the lineup against lefties, not being in the lineup probably some games, I'm sure, even against righties when he had been producing quite well for a sustained period of time. Not allowing players to really get into a groove, find a consistent rhythm. Deploying Jared Young to pinch hit in the last game of the season when this guy had not sniffed a major league batter's box in who knows how long. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, it's just bad. It's just really, really bad. So that, I guess, will summarize my thoughts on the bad of the 2025 Mets and the bad going forward, and the bad looking ahead for the 2026 Mets. Now, that's going to be the bulk of this video. It's looking right now that should be able to wrap this up right about when I'm pulling in home. So I think it's meant to be. I think it's going to neatly wrap itself up, and able to just record this whole video on the way home here, and make the ride a little more enjoyable for myself, and kill some time. And we'll see if, I don't even know if I'm going to edit this. I might just throw this up just as is, and you can tell me how terrible it is. But now let's talk about the good. So let me try to take a deep breath here. Take a deep breath. What do we have to potentially look forward to? Actually, no, let me say one more bad thing, guys. Okay, sorry. Brett Beatty tweaking his back a couple days ago. I mean, we all knew it was over a long time ago, but if you didn't know for sure when that happened that it was over, and once again, Ronnie Mauricio was thrust. I forgot about Ronnie Mauricio, which I guess that says it all, right? Forgot about Ronnie Mauricio. Who cares? Sorry, Ronnie. Who cares? Whatever. So, same thing. So Brett Beatty tweaks his back, and now we're force-fed Ronnie Mauricio in 2 or 3 of the most important games of the entire season. Not out of desire to get this guy some playing time. Again, he had not sniffed the field. He had not sniffed a major league batter's box with any consistency in quite some time, but was once again thrust into a position of extreme importance out of nothing more than dire necessity. So anyway, that's that. Now, apologize for that delay. Now let's get in to the good. Going forward, 2026 New York Mets. So I guess we'll start off with what most of us would probably view as a shining light of some sort, and somebody that most of us are probably looking forward to seeing in the future. And of course, I'm sure most of you know what I'm going to say is, of course, Nolan McLean. So this is a guy that came up for us, did pretty much by any standard as much as any fan could ask for. Incredible stuff, incredible poise, seems like a high character guy, and somebody that I think we're all excited to see what he can do in a full season. Now, nobody knows what's going to happen, and I'm not saying that this guy is a bona fide ace that we can go into 2026 and just pencil him in as our number one starter, as our ace, and we're good, we're fine. We got Nolan McLean, we're completely fine, we're good, we're stable. No, I don't think that's the case, but I do think that this is a pitcher with a really, really interesting and what has proven to be in a short sample size a really effective and exciting arsenal of pitches. Just really nasty stuff, to put it plainly. Just really, really nasty stuff that I'm excited to see going forward. To continue, I think Brendan Sproat, despite the fact that his last outing was underwhelming, to say the least. I mean, he was cruising with his 40-something pitches going into the fifth, I believe it was, and then of course imploded. But I think Sproat has some pretty nice stuff. He was getting the fastball up to 99 and has a pretty good curveball as well. So I think that Sproat can definitely factor in to the Mets in 2026 to round out the trio of youngsters that we called up for the rotation. Jonah Tong obviously got knocked around a little bit. Really hope we didn't shatter his confidence. I mean, this is a guy that most of us, if you ever saw an interview with him before he got called up, I mean, he's just got a very childlike demeanor to him. Definitely just comes across as a young guy. Still excited about Tong. Still excited about him as a prospect. Again, I really, really hope we did not destroy him. I definitely think Tong is going to be a player that will start in AAA and needs to develop a little bit more. But still an exciting prospect on the horizon that we got to see a little preview of. Unfortunately, didn't necessarily go his way, but still an intriguing guy, to say the least. On the player position front, on the other end of home plate, let's say, I think Francisco Alvarez undoubtedly has to be given the credit he deserves. I actually thought that when he was recalled from AAA after being demoted for that period of time after struggling quite a bit, I actually really believed that he was going to be the offensive boost that the Mets were looking for, that we ultimately didn't find on the trade market at the trade deadline, and that ultimately proved to be the case. I think that Alvarez displayed a really nice approach for the most part offensively after being recalled from AAA. I mean, he obviously, we all know, showed just an unbelievable amount of toughness, grit, resilience as far as just playing through battered hands. I don't think anybody thought that he was going to continue to play with the thumb ligament injury, with the broken finger. I mean, you got to take your hat off to Francisco Alvarez, and we can only hope that after he gets his surgery for the thumb and is able to start rehabbing and coming back, we can only hope that this is a that we're getting the same Francisco Alvarez that we were able to see after he was recalled from AAA, and maybe more. But ever since being recalled, I think Francisco Alvarez showed what we all believed that he could be, and he's still a young guy. And I'm excited to see what Francisco Alvarez can continue to do, and can hopefully continue to build off of a really strong second half in 2025. So I'm looking forward to Francisco Alvarez. As I alluded to before I cut myself off before, Luis Torrens, if he's your backup catcher, I think that's a very good position to be in regards to the catching position. Threw out guys at an elite rate. I think even when you look at his offensive numbers as a whole on the year, they actually weren't atrocious. They were, pretty serviceable as far as a backup catcher is concerned, to be sure. So completely fine with Alvarez and Torrens going forward as our primary and secondary catcher. Correct me if I'm wrong about Torrens' contract status. It's really neither here nor there. I mean, it's a backup catcher, not to discredit their importance to a team, but not going to be make or break there. To round out the position player aspect of things, Brett Beatty, I think Brett Beatty deserves a lot of credit for really putting together his best season for sure. Brett Beatty displayed really solid defense at both third base and second base, as well as an above average bat. I think he proved himself capable as a major league hitter, as well as a major league infielder, and being able to play third base and second base effectively, I think is extremely valuable to have. And I only hope that his injury is minor and he'll be ready to go for 2026. I'm excited to see what Brett Beatty can do. Not expecting too much, but I think if the Beatty we saw in 2025 is what we're getting going forward, then that's a player that can absolutely stick and be a guy that you can pencil in to be a third baseman or second baseman for you on a nightly basis. I would give him more chances against lefties too, and see what he can do as a full-time player. I think that Brett Beatty has proven, to me at least, that he can be more than a platoon bat, which brings us over to Mark Vientos. As we all know, had an incredible 2024 campaign. Definitely had some regression, which I think that a lot of people, myself included, expected to a degree. But I also think that he was able to turn it around to an extent where he probably ended the season as well as probably right about a league average hitter, which is nothing to write home about. But to be able to, in your sophomore season, sophomore slump, be able to stabilize and not allow his offensive production to spiral out of control to the point that he just had an atrocious season offensively, I think is encouraging. And like I said before, I would be perfectly comfortable going forward with Vientos as my primary DH / first baseman. Ideally DH, but if they want to see if he's playable at first base, then I think that's something that's potentially worth exploring. So I think that pretty much covers everything that I can think of really at this moment. Unfortunately, the good is pretty brief. The good is pretty brief. Excuse me, long drive here. The good is pretty brief, and let me see if I can take these glasses off. The big reveal, face reveal. No, but the good is very brief. I know I said that 3 times, but we're gonna have to see, and you as fellow Mets fans are gonna have to decide whether you're comfortable with potentially doing a soft rebuild, playing some more young players. Of course, I haven't mentioned. I guess I'll kind of bookend the whole video here with we've got some good young players in the system. We've got Jet Williams. I think that's really the main one. I'm probably forgetting someone. Excuse me. I apologize, guys. I am pretty tired at this point. But yeah, we've got Jet Williams potentially on the horizon. This is a guy that's been pretty hyped and is still somebody that's an intriguing prospect in the system going forward. And yeah, so for me as a Met fan, I'm looking forward. Not saying I'm looking forward to it, but I'm looking forward. I'm expecting to a degree, sort of a soft rebuild here. I guess I should also obviously note that I probably skipped over these guys when I guess it's just too obvious in my mind. But obviously we have Lindor and Soto. We have Lindor and Soto penciled in. So this is not a team that's going to be devoid of talent. We have Lindor and Soto in right field and shortstop. And these are players, Soto, almost 40-40. Lindor, a solid campaign, 30-30. They're going to be there. And I think we can only hope and be optimistic that, well, we got Soto for a million years. And I know we have Lindor for still a few more years. I don't know exactly how many off the top of my head, but I don't necessarily think it's a win now window. My hope as a fan for a timetable would be that 2026 is sort of a reset year and a recalibrate year and a retooling and a soft rebuild, and then 2027 you go out there and you try to compete again. And lest we forget that was the plan when we got rid of Scherzer. That was the plan when we got rid of Verlander and we offloaded these guys for prospects. And the OMG Mets seemingly accelerated that process, but the 2025 embarrassment Mets, I'm just going to call them the embarrassment Mets. The embarrassment Mets proved that was not going to be the case, and that it was a limbo year at best. It was a limbo year at absolute best. It was an abject implosion, and that's not even at worst. I'm not even going to say at worst, because I could say a lot worse, and I'm sure a lot of you can and will say a lot worse. So yeah, we got Lindor and Soto. Soto, God willing, will have many more productive years. Lindor, I don't think it's outrageous to think that he's got more good years than 2026. 2027 Lindor, I think, will still be, hopefully, a productive and good player. So I think that's what we're looking at, guys. I think that's what we're looking at, Mets fans, which is a little bit of a soft reset for 2026. And I think that's where we're at. I don't, there's not necessarily much more I can say. If anybody sits through this entire video, God bless you. You're the absolute best. If anybody, for some reason, skips ahead and is seeing this part and you watch even 30 seconds of this video, God bless you. Thank you very much. I hope that you're not taking this 2025 Mets embarrassment too bad. At the end of the day, we need to remember that we're just the fans here. We don't have any control over what's going on here. We watch this sport for enjoyment, to kill some time, and because we're kind of addicted to it, for whatever reason, to put it kind of bluntly there. So yeah, I mean, that kind of summarizes that. Let me know if you do watch this entire video, rant, breakdown, State of the Union, 2025 recap, and look forward to 2026. Let me know if there's anything that I said that you agreed with, that you disagree with, anything that I just blatantly missed, which I'm sure there's some, anything that you want to correct me on. If you thought it was an atrocious, terrible video, let me know what I could do better. If you liked something, let me know that too. And yeah, that's it. And this is kind of me throwing my hat into the ring for creating some content for the New York Mets. I felt like no better time to do it than coming off of the biggest embarrassment that I could remember by this team. So, yeah, there it is. Thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to see you all again in the future. Loser Mets fan signing out. See ya.